Hey everyone, it is nostalgia time once again. So, after getting the HP ProBook ready for my Christmas, I guess, staycation, we're going to be doing something a little different here. We're beginning our series of looking at various development builds. In this case, we're actually going to be doing the development of Windows XP. But how are we going to do this though? We're going to actually do an install race of beta builds. Remember, we've done install races before. We've done those with OEM installs, but now we're trying it with beta releases of Windows. So I've got 11 pre-Luna builds, and we'll take a look at them each one by one as they all finish. So first up is build 2211, which was compiled on March 9th of 2000. Then we have 2223, which was compiled on April 11th of 2000. As soon as I can find it. I know it couldn't have gone far. There we go. I just have them like very close together. Then we have build 2250, the technical beta build, which was compiled on June 28th of 2000. As we can see, a lot of these earlier builds still mention Windows 2000. Build 2257, another NT build. This one was build 2257, which was compiled on August 10th, 2000. Then we have 2267, which was compiled on September 9th, 2000. Then build 2276, which was compiled on September 28th, 2000. Then we have build 2287, which was compiled on October 12th, 2000. Then it's build 2296, the official Beta 1 build of Whistler. It was compiled on October 24th, 2000, just a few days before Halloween. Then we go into Beta 2, build 2410, which was compiled on December 8th of 2000. Then we have build 2416, which was compiled on January 4th of 2001. And last but not least, build 2419, which was compiled a few days after on January 13th, 2001. So as we can see from all of the installers, it looks like a few of them aren't capturing correctly. So while I fix them all, we can see that in those earlier builds, they all still mention its predecessor, Windows 2000. However, a little later on, it would of course eventually mention Windows Whistler. But otherwise, as you can see, all these screens are going to be exactly identical to what we would see eventually in XP. Now, while we wait for all of these, I'm not sure what's going on with 2287. It doesn't look like it wants to start. I think it's probably a bad disk I have, but nonetheless, we'll go through each build one at a time as they finish. Now, while we wait for all these installers to load, let's talk a little history right now about Whistler coming up to this point. So back in the 2000s, Microsoft had realized that the MS-DOS kernel was becoming significantly outdated, considering the fact that the MS-DOS kernel was starting to become unstable. So, what Microsoft did was they wanted to create a new version of Windows, in fact, two new versions of Windows, bringing that kernel to home users for the first time. Initially, they were going to do it under the original release structure with two separate releases. The next home release was going to be Neptune, and the other business release was going to be Odyssey. So, what Microsoft ended up doing was they ended up merging both of these projects together, both Neptune and Odyssey, to create Whistler, which would eventually become Windows XP. This would be a revolutionary change for Windows because going forward, Windows would be released under a home and professional edition, each with different features. So essentially home users would get home-based features, but then when it comes to businesses, they would get features such as Active Directory joining a domain, etc., etc. Features that would become essential in modern day Windows. And we will also be seeing a new design take shape as well as all of these begin. You must select a different partition, so probably got to delete the partition first. All right, and now we can start. So we will skip the aspects of the installation. And there we go. Unpartitioned space. And we gotta delete the partition first, otherwise it's going to fail. Give it a moment to examine everything. I thought I said delete the partition. All right. Yes, go ahead and reformat the partition. And let's start the setup. I agree. Unpartitioned space and format. No, do not do aspects of the installation. The disk may be damaged. All right, NTFS file system. So as we can see, both 2211 and 2223 still mention Windows 2000 on the boot screen, which has, of course, not changed. So now, in just a moment, we will see a updated boot screen that would replace the Windows 2000 boot screen altogether. And there it is, codename Whistler with the old Windows flag, and with the Windows colors going from left to right, fading in and out. That's actually kind of cool. But unfortunately, this specific boot screen, would not be seen in the final release of XP. In my opinion, I believe these Whistler boot screens were very well thought out. No, they were very well designed, and I'm very impressed. I'll go ahead and give you all a closer look at the boot screen there before it fades out into the next phase of setup. And in fact, we will be seeing all new graphics in the second phase of setup once it loads here. And there's the fade out transition effect, which would not be utilized in the final release. It would just go straight to black. And that is what the second phase of setup screen looks like. You can see it almost looks identical to XP in a sort of way, but there are a few differences. You can see there are clouds, which would not be seen in the final release. And of course, up there, Codename Whistler with the old Windows flag. These almost look identical, but except the check marks would actually be replaced with radio buttons in the final release. And of course, we have the setup will complete an approximately time remaining clock. That would be utilized in the final release. And we can see it mentions Windows Whistler Personal, which would eventually become XP Home Edition. An error occurred that prevents setup from continuing. Failed to install the product catalogs. So earlier you saw the updated boot screen for build 2267. As you can see, the setup wizard here now looks almost like Windows Millennium Edition, except all the branding has actually now been changed to just say Whistler. Because when Whistler was in development, Windows Millennium had also been released, Millennium Edition, which would be one of the worst versions of Windows that was made, considering it was such poor timing and not many hardware vendors had compatible drivers for Millennium. But if we go to 2257, we can see that the Windows 2000 branding on the boot screen has actually been removed, and now it just says codename Whistler. However, the first time it crashed with a exception not handled error. I'll keep trying it and I'll see if it'll end up installing all the way. So we'll see what happens. So anyway, welcome to Windows Whistler. And again, this setup is exactly like what we would see in Windows 2000, especially in those other builds. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a winner, Bill 2419. And we can see that this behaves like it does in the final release of XP, where it asks to resize the screen for proper display. 2419 is the first one to reach the out of box. 2250 is still installing components, same with 2223. 2257 is in its final stages. It's installing the start menu stuff and final tasks. Also, 2267 is in its same stage, but 2211 is the tortoise of this whole thing because it's still configuring devices. In fact, so many of them failed to install, I had to ask it to postpone the installation of them till after the setup was done. In fact, I think it was like 3 of them. I'm not sure if there's going to be any more that I'll have to acknowledge, but. And there's the out of box video, the intro video for 2419. Well, anyway, as for the other 4 builds, those didn't even make it past starting Windows at all. It didn't even start the installation. It was stuck there for basically forever at that point. So you can see this out-of-box experience looks nearly final. It says, thank you for purchasing Windows Codename Whistler. Let's spend a few minutes setting up your computer. But not sure if this agent thing's ever going to load. But that is Merlin, not the animated question mark like we would see in the final release of XP. But there is also a step counter down there at the bottom, which also would not be seen in the final release, and that next button I believe is a placeholder. I'm available to assist you through this one-time process. I don't think it'll let us go to the next page until the animation is done. Unlike in XP, if at any time you need my help, you can just click me right there, or press the F1 key. And I believe that's the same way it behaves too in modern versions of Windows, especially in Windows 11. If I press F1 on the Explorer window, it'll search get help for some reason. It does this too in Windows 10. But anyway, we'll just say no, that this computer will just connect directly to the internet. And then this is the product activation, which will say no, do not activate. And then next it should ask us for our username. No, I'm the only person who will regularly use. Now this actually does not apply in the final release. Enter, I believe this is a username, because if there's going to be multiple people using this computer, you could set up multiple usernames. So it says, congratulations, you're ready to go. So we'll go ahead and click finish and let the setup complete. But that question about is multiple people going to use this computer, that actually does not make it into the final release of XP. What essentially happens is when you're asked to create a username, you can just create multiple usernames right there. So you can just type each username in each box, and then it'll create those individual users after the setup. But I believe the first account that is configured would be by default an administrator, and then every other account configured would be a local account. I believe that is the case. Alright, while those finish up here, let's zoom this build in here. If we go into the display properties here, we can see that the theme that's used here is actually known as Watercolor. This was a prototype theme for the Luna theme, and it was not intended to be in the final release of XP. But then we can see some of the backgrounds, I believe, from XP are here. And this is the Follow Me wallpaper. I'm not sure if these were in Windows 2000 or these would eventually make their way into XP, but it looks like we already have the final backgrounds. But the background here is actually known as Professional in this build. And there we go. You can see the Follow Me with the fish. Ah, yes, I remember that one. I remember the Follow Me wallpaper from back in the day. But anyway, on the desktop we can see we have a README document. It's basically some notes about this build. So these are beta notes, release notes for beta 1. And that just gives some instructions and other information. So what this comment window is if you identify a problem with a specific program or a specific component of a program, you could put in an email address, the beta ID if you have it, and you could explain to them how severe or minor this issue is, and so they can correct this fault before the final release of XP. So that's what that looks like. So in the build notes on BetaWiki, if we open up the task manager, it says there are going to be some, some graphical glitches with the watercolor theme. That is indeed mostly what we're seeing here. But again, that is to be expected because this is a beta release of Windows. And that is a beta release. It is a beta release of Windows, so. And now, if we, I don't want to press Windows key L because that's going to lock my host system too, even though I'm on a virtual machine. As you can see, here is a prototype 2-column start menu, which actually does look pretty close to the final release. So you'd see we have the administrator there, although in the final build there would be a user icon, like a profile picture, on the top right. But otherwise everything is in the right place. And if we look at the new menu here, where the black just zooms right out in like all 4 directions, this is actually the first build that introduces a feature that we would see in the final release known as fast user switching. So essentially what this is, and this would be a very significant change in future builds of Windows, is you can switch between multiple user accounts without having to close all your work and log off. However, this is only if you have the welcome screen enabled. If you have the classic style, you cannot do that. And speaking of the welcome screen, this is what it looks like. So you can see here on the left, that's your PC name. And then there's the Windows flag, and it says, welcome. To log on and create your account name. And it says to manage or change user accounts, go to the control panel. So we'll go ahead and we can log back in. And it says logging on. So that's what the login screen looks like on this build of Windows. Now let's open up the start menu and take a look at the system properties. And we will see that this is Whistler build 2419. So as you can see on the recycle bin on the right hand side, there's actually handles on top of it, which would not be utilized in the final build of Windows XP. Although the icon does look correct, mostly correct. And it looks like most of the icons are also what we would see in the final release of XP. Except there are still places where the old Windows flag is still present. So you can see here, it still identifies it as Windows 2000 in the system properties. But if we open up WinVer, we will see that it now just says Microsoft Windows with the final NT version for XP 5.1. And the banner now reads Microsoft codenamed Whistler. And if we open up the control panel, we will see that it has received some updates from those other builds that we are actually still waiting for to install. And as we can see, everything is actually now properly grouped into categories. And we can also see some sort of final and prototype icons that again we would see in XP. When we open up the user accounts page, you see we can create a new account. And after we do that, we're presented with 3 account types. Computer Administrator, which of course can make system-wide changes. Standard, which is just like a local account. And then Limited Account, it's a standard user but with limited permissions. However, in XP, it would be changed to just 3 types. Computer Administrator, Limited, and Guest. And Guest is like a temporary profile that will be cleared each time the user logs off. Now when we press Control Delete here, just like in Windows 2000, it'll come up with the Windows Security menu. You can see the banner still reads Windows codename Whistler Professional. And of course, that's where you go to put your password in and log into the system. So this is interesting, the beginnings of Microsoft merging elements from 2000 into Whistler. And we'll go ahead and show what the updated turn off computer menu looks like. You can see the power icon that is, I believe, the final icon. Restart, I think that's also the final icon. Sleep, I believe that is the final icon, if I remember. I don't think it is. And then cancel, it wouldn't actually be that. It wouldn't be that crossed out circle. It'll actually be just a hyperlink in the final build. So that's really all there is to see in build 2419. The only difference really is the visual style. So now we will just wait for the other builds to finish installing. And I believe there are a few that are still in their final stages. Alright, so 2267 is done. You can see the network identification wizard just came up. And if I try to move that over, wow, this thing's laggy. Wow, that is absolutely in 16 colors. And we can see the welcome screen is just like what we saw before. However, on 2250, that one is also done. It's also asking for a network connection. So we'll just click cancel on that screen. And now I don't know where the network connection window went. It just disappeared on me. So we can see that in this build, you can see all mentions of Windows 2000 are gone and now just say Whistler. And here's the updated boot screen in build number 2267. Once again, this would not be seen in the final release of it. So 2250 is almost ready to go. Yep, don't expect those fake Whistler sounds. As far as I know, I believe it's a mixture of Windows 98, BIOS, and something. I don't know. And here we go again into 2267. As you can see, ooh, it's a blank welcome screen. It's a welcome screen with absolutely nothing there. Here is build 2250, the official technical beta build. This was released to whoever attended the PDC 2000 conference on July 13th, according to Wikipedia. But again, we can see pretty much this still looks like Windows 2000. As we can see, it has the new log off options and turn off computer. But if we end up going to my computer, we can see these are the Windows 2000 icons. And we can see the getting started window took forever to come up. But as we can see, it still mentions Windows 2000. This is the only trace of Windows 2000 that is left as of now. So as we can see here, this is what the new File Explorer menu looks like. It is coming together. We can open up the C drive here. It says Explorer.exe has generated errors and will be closed by Windows. You will need to restart the program. An error. So you can see this is what the new File Explorer looks like. The new File Explorer design. Now there actually is something interesting we can do here in this build. If we go into taskbar properties, and there we go. I believe that's on start. When we press Alt D and then click apply, and then we'll open the start menu up again. We should have enabled, yep, a prototype 2-column start menu that, again, would be seen in the final release of XP. However, we can see some things in this are out of place. But again, it isn't really any different from the original functionality. Now, if we open up the control panel, and we can see that this is an early version of the category view. However, it only shows the most commonly accessed utilities. It doesn't group anything into categories. Now, the classic style, we actually would only see that on the first boot. And this should be the log off menu. So, when we log off, we will see, and we should see, and yep, here it comes, the updated welcome screen, which is now enabled by default in this build. So we can see it's just like the other build that we have seen. But then we actually have a secondary account on here. It's like another administrator. But again, it is password protected, but we can log back in as the administrator and, do all sorts of things like that. So really that's the only change UI wise. And in 2267, other than the boot screen, there really is nothing else to see. And I see 2223 is asking for network settings now. And now we'll let that one log in for the first time. However, 2211 seems to be, and still is, the tortoise out of all of this because it has been taken an absolute eternity to even get through anything. It even hanged on the hardware setup, which really isn't good. But in 2211, there actually is the logon screen that was used in Microsoft Neptune. However, it isn't enabled by default in this build. So what we would have to do is go into the registry and change a dword value in order to display the new welcome page. And I believe in 2223 it's the same story. So just like in that other build we were just at, the classic style only shows on the first boot, and then after that we see that new welcome screen going forward from there. So here's build 2223, which, as you can see, it changes the text down there in the build string to say Windows Whistler Professional. So this is the professional variant, but other than some updated icons and such, there isn't really too many other differences. See, it says Whistler 2001 on the left-hand side there of the start menu. And now when we open up my computer, here we can see once again the thing that says get started with Windows 2000. And as we can see, the elements of Windows Millennium Edition and Windows 2000 both being merged together. And like this there, you can see that is also Windows 2000. But down there you can also see that this is from Millennium Edition, so there are some changes to Explorer in this build. But then there are also some updates to the hardware device driver wizard and new hardware, user interface, and of course Explorer, which now shows the amount of free disk space. I believe it was on that first page that we were just at. And other than that, I don't really think there's anything else too much in this build. So here's the updated Neptune welcome screen that is enabled by default in this build. And we can see, well, there is supposed to be a Windows flag up here, but it does not appear to be showing up. But then, of course, we can click on our user account and log in, which will show the classic style. Again, unsigned drivers. And I believe in 2257, there isn't really too many changes. But then in 2257, there isn't really going to be too many other changes, except this would be the first build that introduces the watercolor theme. And then, of course, the start menu. It's a prototype start menu, which again is actually almost similar to the final release of Windows XP. This is exactly the control panel that we would see in Windows 2000 and Millennium Edition. So, other than that, nothing else really exciting to see. And because these other two builds are taking a freaking eternity to even load and set up, I think it's best that we're just going to go ahead and end it here, considering that these two aren't really going to feature too many other changes. So, this is the beginning of our journey to Windows XP. So, next time we're going to be doing yet another install race. So, that's going to be a lot of fun. But until then, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.